It's a funny thought, but have you ever felt like a tourist in your own hometown? Well, that exact question is what sparked a really fascinating summer project for one person, who decided to see the place he grew up, Yilan, Taiwan, through completely fresh eyes. So, let's join him on this journey of rediscovery. So, this was Tony's mission. It wasn't just about visiting places, it was about documenting them in a whole new language, in English. He was turning a personal challenge into a way to share his home with the rest of us. It's about so much more than just language, right? It's about finding new words for old memories.
And that really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, honestly, when was the last time you really explored the place you live? What kind of hidden stories are just waiting for you right around the corner?
Okay, so let's dive into Tony's summer quest. His journey started with a really simple goal. Use his summer vacation to try some new things and collect some interesting stories. No grand expedition, just a simple promise to himself to look a little closer.
But don't let that simple goal fool you. This project was ambitious. The plan was to document 100 distinct experiences. This was way more than a summer diary. This was a systematic exploration of his home, giving it the curiosity it really deserved.
So with a goal that big, where do you even begin? Well, for Tony, the answer was to start by listening to the land itself. He kicked things off by exploring the natural landscapes of Yilan, letting them be the first storytellers.
First stop on the list, Peng Peng Hot Spring. Now, we're not talking about some fancy resort here. No way. This is a wild, natural hot spring deep in Datong Township. It's the kind of place that feels ancient, like you've just stumbled upon a real secret corner of the world. And get this, the name itself tells a story. Peng Peng isn't just a place, it's a sound. It comes from the indigenous Atayal language, from the word bong bong, which perfectly mimics the sound of the springs bubbling up from the earth. How cool is that? It's a name that ties the place directly to its original people and the voice of the land itself.
This really shows you how much a landscape can change over time. The Renshan Natural Trail, today it's this gorgeous recreational area. But back in the day, it was a huge industrial center for camphor production. It's kind of like finding out your favorite peaceful park used to be a bustling factory floor. The same land tells two totally different stories.
Here's another amazing example, the Sunglo Trail. It's so much more than just a path. The local Atayal community actually calls it the Trail of Happiness, and they manage it themselves as a form of ecotourism, actively preserving a place that was once their traditional hunting ground. It's just a beautiful story of conservation and cultural pride.
This deep connection to the land leads us straight to the people who've shaped it for centuries. Tony's journey quickly became an encounter with the living traditions of Yilan, especially the Atayal tribe.
He got to learn about the incredible art of Atayal bow making from elders like Mr. Wei Jianfu. It all starts with the right material, a shrub called lygodium, which is known for being super elastic and strong. But the craft, it's about so much more than the final product. It's a living artifact, a way of handing down ancestral knowledge and keeping their heritage alive.
And it's a similar story with the Atayal backstrap loom. This is way more than just a tool. It's totally essential to the identity of Atayal women. Mastering weaving, creating these complex patterns you see referenced, was a true rite of passage into adulthood. It was a skill that symbolized a deep connection to her ancestors and her place within the tribe. So, beyond these incredible living traditions, Tony's journey also started to uncover these echoes of the past, layers of history, sometimes forgotten, that are literally written into the landscape of Yilan.
He visited a place called Leshui Village, which has this really powerful nickname, the Forgotten Tribe. And you have to wonder, right? Why forgotten? What happened there?
Well, in its heyday, Leshui was a bustling hub. It was a super important stop on the Forest Railway and was the region's main granary. But then, the railway stopped running, the local government moved away, and just like that, prosperity left with them, leaving behind a quiet village and a story of what happens when the world moves on. The timeline for the Hansi Shrine tells another one of these complex stories. It was built back in the 1930s during the Japanese colonial period, but then it fell into neglect for decades, just abandoned. It wasn't until the 1990s that the local community rallied to bring it back. It's a real cycle of creation, abandonment, and then finally rebirth.
But what makes this shrine so fascinating is that it was never just one thing. It was this incredible blend of cultures. The Japanese authorities built it to promote Shinto beliefs and assimilate the local people. But the Atayal people, they wove their own ancestral spirit worship right into its practices. It became this unique, hybrid sacred space where two cultures met.
So after exploring the land, the culture, the history, what does this all add up to? Well, it led to a profound rediscovery of what home really truly means. The place Tony had known his whole life was completely transformed. Yilan was no longer just a familiar backdrop, it became a living museum. Every trail, every village, every tradition was an exhibit with its own story to tell. All it took was the intention to really look and to listen.
And it all came from that one summer goal, 100 unique experiences. Each one was a piece of a puzzle, and when he put them all together, it revealed a picture of his hometown that was so much richer and more detailed than he had ever imagined.
Which leaves us with one final thought. Tony's journey proves that you don't need to travel halfway across the world to find incredible stories. They're all around us, in the names of our streets, the history of our buildings. So the real question is, what stories does your hometown hold? Just waiting for you to discover them.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a custom geographical tour through Yilan County, Taiwan. We have a really fascinating stack of sources here that map out this complex tapestry of history, preservation, and, well, radical transformation across two very distinct regions.
That's right. Our mission today is to kind of give you a shortcut to understanding the tension that's really at the heart of Yilan's identity. We're contrasting the mountainous indigenous heart of Datong Township with the bustling, history-rich urban center of Luodong.
And when you look at the history here, I mean, it spans the Qing Dynasty, Japanese colonial era, and modern development. It's just so clear that both these areas have been profoundly shaped, but in completely different ways.
Yeah, and we'll explore two major themes that offer these contrasting perspectives on what we call progress and preservation. First, we're going to head high into the mountains to Datong to examine the truly vital efforts to safeguard the indigenous Atayal or Tel cultural heritage.
Right, through things like specialized education and traditional crafts. And then second, we're diving into Luodong, and we're going to track its rapid urban transformation. The focus there is on how modernization didn't just change the town. It literally paved over its most critical historical infrastructure.
The waterways, the very things that gave it life.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting in the profound geography of Datong Township. The sources describe the sheer scale of the environment here. I mean, when you view the massive mountains, there's this immediate, visceral feeling of respect. And honestly, even a little bit of fear. The scale of nature just makes you feel so small.
It really speaks to the deep spiritual and cultural connection the Tayal people have with this landscape. This isn't gentle terrain at all. It's rugged, it's impressive, and it defines the isolation and resilience of the communities there. The geography itself is a story.
It certainly is. For example, the sources mention a notable natural attraction, the Peng Peng Hot Spring. It's described as a wild creek hot spring.
Which tells you right away this isn't some developed resort.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It belongs to the hard, metamorphic rock classification of the Chiwishan mountain range. It's just elemental.
Exactly. And that remoteness is key to understanding the next layer. The indispensable role of the rural schools. We're talking about places like Yinchi Elementary School and Tatong Elementary School. These aren't just educational institutions. They are the essential cultural hubs for these small indigenous communities.
And we really need to put the size in perspective here because the numbers are, well, they're startling. Datong Elementary branch schools often have only 40 to 50 students total. The entire Datong Elementary student body is less than 100 children.
Now imagine the weight placed on those few students. This is where a fact becomes an insight. These children are carrying an immense societal responsibility. They are, the front line of cultural preservation.
It's so much more than learning math and reading. They're tasked with mastering and preserving the special Tayal culture, the customs. The hope is that by getting this specialized education, they might come back one day as future educators, representing their own communities, their heritage.
And this commitment, it runs year-round. A lot of parents in these remote areas might have to work long hours, so the schools step up. They run these continuous 6-week summer camps and courses, often providing lunch boxes. It's a whole support system that ensures the cultural education doesn't just stop.
I find the dedication to the traditional crafts just so moving. We see that preservation happening hands-on, specifically at Datong Junior High School. They run these summer workshops that are
explicitly designed to pass down heritage.
This is where we meet the masters. The sources detail the traditional skill of atayal bow and arrow making, taught by revered elders who are affectionately called shilao. One master mentioned is a Mr. Wei Jianfu, who is recognized as a national treasure for his command of this craft.
That title, National Treasure, really underscores the value society places on this living history. And the specificity of the craft is incredible. They don't just use any wood. The material for these bows is lygodium, which is known locally as lusong jiami.
It's a type of shrub or small tree, and they choose it precisely because of its resilience, its elasticity. This choice reflects generations of accumulated knowledge. And historically, this skill wasn't like a hobby. In early Tayal society, archery was an essential skill for young boys, for hunting and, critically, for protecting their homes.
So they were learning the core skill required to survive and maintain the social order.
Absolutely. And parallel to the bow making for boys, you have the equally significant art of weaving for the women. Traditional Tayal women use the horizontal backstrap loom, a skill they typically learn quite young, around 13 or 14, from their mothers or grandmothers.
This is where the skill becomes almost spiritual, right?
It's completely spiritual. If we connect this to the deepest values of Tayal life, weaving was absolutely foundational to a woman's identity. Only skilled weavers could achieve the traditional symbols of adulthood. The wenmian, which are the facial tattoos, or the kyuchi.
Okay, let's pause on kyuchi. We're talking about tooth patterns. What did that actually involve physically?
That's a crucial detail. Keichi literally translates to toothless patterns. It refers to the painful but very significant custom of filing or even knocking out the upper canine teeth. This was a signal of entry into adulthood, and for women, it was only achieved if they proved themselves as skilled weavers, a permanent physical marker of their cultural achievement.
Wow. So the loom wasn't just a tool for making cloth, it was a prerequisite for identity, for status, even for spiritual passage.
Precisely. The sources note that this weaving skill was deemed necessary to successfully pass the ancestral bridge after death. The act of weaving was so intertwined with Tayal female identity that it determined her ultimate spiritual fate. That connection is just profound.
That truly gives us a sense of the culture's depth and datam, an entire way of life where every craft, from bowmaking to weaving, is a high-stakes endeavor linked directly to survival and spirituality. It's a culture fighting, really fighting, to maintain its essence.
And that profound isolation and preservation is the perfect contrast for our next stop, the urban density of Luodong, where the story is less about fighting to preserve living customs and more about, well, fighting to reclaim a lost history.
Let's make that transition. Luodong is geographically important, situated right between the mountains and the rivers. It grew into this critical hub for agriculture and, crucially, for trade.
And the historical lifeline for Luodong was water flowing freely through a network of canals. The most significant was the Nanmen Canal, historically known as Nanmen Port, along with its branches like the Yumei Canal.
And these canals weren't just for one thing during the Qing dynasty. They were this multifunctional municipal infrastructure. They acted as natural moats for defense, they provided irrigation, which is how Luodong got its reputation as a rice granary, and they were critical transportation routes.
Right, think of them as the town's highways, defenses, and irrigation system all rolled into one.
So what happened?
Well, this is where the story takes that sharp turn I mentioned, that critical shift between 1983 and 1985. As industry exploded and the population grew, the canals suffered from terrible pollution, and the traffic congestion in the town center just became untenable.
So what was the solution?
The Luodong Township office made a decisive, and I'd say dramatic, decision. They covered up a massive stretch of the Nanmen Canal, that whole section, from Xingdong Road to Boai Hospital. They just turned it into Nanmen Road.
Wait. So this massive, centuries-old moat, trade route, and central water feature that had defined the town's identity, they just paved it over.
Paved it right over. It was a monumental engineering and political feat, yes. And it solved the immediate problems of traffic and pollution. But with the water literally buried, so were the cultural scenes that defined life there.
Like what?
You lose the vibrancy of events like the dragon boat races, which were held every year at Nanmen Port. These events attracted huge crowds, including, elegantly dressed women from the nearby pleasure quarters. These major social focal points just vanished.
And that prioritization of industry goes back even further, right, to the Japanese colonial period when the timber industry flourished.
Correct. Luodong became a major processing center with huge sawmills, all supported by the railway transport system the Japanese established. This boom fueled the need for modern governance.
And a key figure in that was Mayor Chen Chunjing. Appointed in 1908, he moved to Luodong and really became the engine for public works.
He was instrumental. He established critical infrastructure, laid out the parts of the Luodong waterway that remained, and the forestry office branch. His tenure really accelerated Luodong's transformation into a modern commercial center.
And the chaos of that growth led directly to things like organized markets. Minqing Market, for instance, started in 1902 and was completed in 1935 during the Japanese era.
It was a direct response to street vendor traffic. The sheer volume of people selling goods spilled out onto the roads, making them impassable, so the government centralized it. It's a perfect example of how rapid growth forces urbanization.
But the history isn't just in the infrastructure. It's reflected so vividly in the town's blend of faith, in its temples. Let's look at Qing'an Temple, also known as Dasheng Temple. It worships a trio of deities, Kaxingga, Kaizhang Shengwang, and the Great Sage of Heaven.
This temple is a fascinating historical document in stone. Generally, the Japanese occupation heavily restricted the construction of Taoist temples, but Kaxingga was a figure respected by the Japanese, as he was seen as this sort of transitional historical figure.
So that's the political insight. Because of that respect, Kaining Temple was one of the few permitted to expand during the colonial period. That makes it a really unique exception that tells us so much about colonial religious strategy.
Absolutely. And just to quickly clarify for you, Kaizhang Shengwang is the patron saint of the early Hokkien settlers, so he's deeply connected to the town's founding. Meanwhile, locals credit the Great Sage of Heaven with driving away a devastating plague in 1920. So you have political history, settlement history, and local belief all in one structure.
And if we expand our view out, we should also mention the significant Hakka cultural presence. Yilan County has a Hakka population of about 70,000, maybe 15% of the total, primarily settled near mountainous areas.
This is a really important layer. The Hakka contribution to Yilan's identity is significant, especially through their faith. Their primary deities are the three mountain kings from Guangdong. And what's compelling is that Yilan County actually hosts the highest number of these specific temples in all of Taiwan. We're talking 39 or 40.
Wow, and for a final stunning example of this cultural integration, you have to look at Mitsui Temple. It houses the Japanese Rui Huilguanyin, a legacy of the colonial period.
But the tradition didn't end when the Japanese left. The local community integrated it. They continued to worship that figure, but now alongside their traditional Taiwanese deities. Mitsui Temple perfectly showcases that layering of spiritual practices that modernization and colonial history left behind.
This deep dive really does bring the tension into focus. On one hand, you have the rural indigenous community of Datong, where traditions like bow making and weaving are preserved as these vital living cultural resources.
And then you contrast that with Luodong, which was defined by relentless, fast-paced modernization. Luodong's community is now, in a way, struggling to reclaim the memory of its lost heritage. The canals that were paved over, the structures that were replaced, the two towns are like opposite sides of the same modernization coin.
It makes you wonder about the long-term calculus of development. I mean, if a critical piece of a town's history, like the Nanmen Canal, which was its lifeblood, a moat, a trade route for centuries, has been literally paved over for urban efficiency, how do you even begin to value what was lost?
And that raises a really important question for you, the listener, and for urban planners everywhere. If the past has been buried right underneath the asphalt for the sake of efficiency, what responsibility does modern society bear to unearth those memories, to document them, and to make sure future generations recognize the full cultural and historical cost of modernization?